until I can get a tab out of this song, I think it would be cool to just put out an instructional of how I play the piece. And then if we do get tabs one day, then cool. And if we don't get tabs, whatever. But if you would like to support what I do, independent of whether or not tabs are available, I do have a Patreon page. It's just kind of, just give what you feel so inclined to give. I don't need it, but it does help. I promise you it does. And I really appreciate the support. And the more support I have, the more time I can dedicate to putting out this kind of content. So it gives me an excuse to get in front of the camera and talk about that kind of stuff, and it helps me kind of figure out what would be useful for other people, what would be useful for me to teach, instead of just going off on tangents, because I have very weird taste. I have very eclectic interests. Your input in terms of stuff that you would like me to teach is greatly appreciated. But today we're going to start with Lonely at the Top, because I do know I've had people ask about that, and my friend Newman has started learning it, and it's so wild to watch someone learn my arrangements. So if you learn these, or if you learn anything that I do, please let me know. I would love to see it, and if you need help with any of it, let me know. And I'm just so excited that people are interested in what I'm doing as a musician. It's the coolest thing to know that someone took the time to learn the craziness that I just have come up with. I think what I'm going to do is, since Content ID is probably going to claim this anyways, I'm going to use samples from different performances, the studio version and the live performances of this song that I pulled from in order to figure out how to voice this arrangement. So I've already got a version of Lonely at the Top recorded on my YouTube channel, so I'll link that below as well. I'll just go ahead and use that, since that's already a pretty polished version of how I play it, generally speaking. That being said, the arrangement does change a little bit, so the shapes make sense. The shapes kind of stay consistent, but the feel with which I do it sometimes changes just based off of mood, because there's enough space for that in the way that it's arranged. If you're not familiar with Randy Newman, I highly recommend checking it out. Well, the Monsters, Inc. soundtrack. Oh my gosh. Like, if you're one of those Pixar nerds like myself, it's the soundtrack for Monsters, Inc. I think is one of the best Disney soundtracks ever done. And if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend it. It's a funny movie. It's cute. And they also have Riders in the Sky. For the Pixar short, they use Riders in the Sky, so it's like Ranger Doug and that whole group, which is so cute. As for Randy's solo work, let me do a disclaimer that the lyrics for a lot of his songs are very dark, but you have to understand that I've heard from people that I know that he's one of the nicest people you could ever meet. He's not a jerk. I feel like, if you look at the lyrics of Lonely at the Top, this is why I'm talking about it, but he writes from the perspective of an unreliable narrator who's kind of a jerk. And so he's playing a role, he's playing a character, and so the song Lonely at the Top is about this arrogant character who is kind of sneering down at his own fans. It's basically just sarcasm in song form. When I showed this arrangement to John Knowles, he had introduced me to some really cool Randy Newman stuff a few years back, and when I within a month I had worked on this arrangement of Lonely at the Top, and just didn't tell John. I just played it for him the next time I saw him, and he told me that Chet Atkins had a version of that. Chet loved that song and had an arrangement of it, but was really bothered by the lyrics of it and didn't want to play it in front of people so that people wouldn't think he was sneering at them just because of that unreliable narrator character. The way that it's recorded on the album is, of course, it kind of has piano and vocal as a base, but it also includes horn parts. But then the live version is standalone as a piano version, and I encourage you to check out both. They're both great, and they're both a little bit different, which allowed me as an arranger to kind of create a Frankenstein version based off of what was possible for me to play. So I will say that there are some chords in it that I technically would be able to do it on the guitar, based on how I'm tuned and what capo position I'm in and things like that, but I just find that it's a bit of a stretch and it compromises my ability to stay in that groove when I play it. So it just kind of depends on how much of, if I'm sitting down or standing up. If I'm sitting down, I have more room to kind of do these kind of postures with the guitar. I have more reach this way. And part of the reason that it's capoed up is so that I do have a bit more reach, but I don't capo it up too much because then when I get to the bridge section of it, I'm butting up against the 12th fret, like that, that horn on the back of the neck. And then I capo on the 4th fret, maybe on the 3rd, depending on the guitar I'm using. And I tend to play this more acoustic because I find that the way that I have to fingerpick it to get that sort of percussiveness doesn't translate quite as well through magnetic pickups as it does through a piezo pickup. So those kind of fingerpicking syncopations can be really difficult to make sound musical on a more magnetic pickup system. It sounds more banjo-y than it does glossy and shimmery like you want it to. And you can have that and still have that bite with acoustic guitars. So generally I just do acoustic guitar, capo, 4th fret or 3rd fret depending, and E flat standard tuning. I'm currently using the Bluechip JDS reso, which is the small version of one of their signature picks, and it has really changed my life and changed my ability to project through my instrument. So if you're looking for a good thumb pick, I highly recommend them. I throw that in there because you wouldn't believe how much that affects your attack on the instrument. Also, I don't use any nail whatsoever, and I try to make sure that it's as smooth as possible so that there's nothing that's going to hang on the strings. So that's where most of my tone comes from in terms of the right hand. You do not want to play this in a rush. You just kind of want the audience like waiting for the next notes, and that kind of allows you to, it feels consistent with the tone of the song to kind of be a little bit arrogant about your time on stage. Like, it takes a little, like, you have to get into a little bit of a mood to play it. Not in a bad way, but just a little bit sarcastic, a little bit cheeky. So you have to be coming from a cheeky place to kind of make this sound right. And I've noticed when I listen back to takes of myself playing it, when I like get to that breaking point where I've just had enough of all that background noise and it's messing up my takes, or I'm messing up my own takes or whatever, when I get mad is when this song sounds the best. And I think it helps to kind of channel your emotions for what song you're playing, and definitely with this one it pays off so well. And there's a couple riffs I'll kind of highlight, but generally it's just going to be chronologically through it. So So with that, it's just, that's all open. And that gives me a chance to jump down to like the 2nd fret and pick that up with my 4 and my 3 fingers. Hammer on with my 1 on that B string. Okay, so that's the intro part of it. So those, okay, so now into that riff. I'm playing that with my my 4 and my 3. So I'm fretting that. That's the D string. Just the triad of that, but in a minor. So it just kind of, this riff just kind of goes between like an E major and a E major and a B diminished. So that's really just the chords behind it, but it's a little bit obfuscated. So you've got the, and I just kind of play with the syncopations on that a little bit, but so I'm just moving those up and down. So that chord is using the index finger on the 2nd fret of the 6th string. And then just 3 and 4 on strings D and G. Ending right there on just like a B diminished. Probably one of the first blues chords you learn, but and in terms of the picking pattern, I'm just doing downstrokes with a thumb and just picking up strokes for the melody line. And then this sort of thing, I really like using the this is where I prefer using it with a thumb pick, is because you can really just dig in and you have a bit more bite when you play this kind of thing. So I'm just doing using the thumb pick. I'm not finger picking this, I'm just. So the fingering on that. So that's your G string. So that's your 3, 2, 1, and then slide the 1 down, and then pull off the 1, all on that same upstroke. And it's really important to try and make that even and spaced out. And you know, where there are triplet feel sort of things in this arrangement, that's really one of the only things that personally, when I try to perform it, I try my best to make sure that that stays the same, regardless of the other ways that I play around with the syncopation. If I've got triplets or G string 5th fret, what I'm doing right there is just, I'm doing an upstroke with the thumb pick. And then using the thumb pick again, I just go in and really accent that open note. And you see, you know, when you get into the verse, it's almost the same thing, but you're just playing with the melody line a little bit and making the melody line stand out by reducing the dynamics on both, but by reducing the dynamics on like the lower staff of those bass lines, but and then what I do bring the dynamics down a little bit with this section so that it just, you know, when Randy is singing this, he kind of is kind of whispering it almost. So I want to kind of, if you play with your dynamics a lot with a crowd, I think it makes them a bit more attentive. Depending, you know, if you're in a bar or something like that, that's going to be different, and people are going to expect loud, happy music with the tempo and all that kind of stuff. But if you're if you're playing for an audience that's kind of seated and you're kind of at the center of the room, you can play a little bit more with dynamics and really play with their attention, and it's really fun to do that. And I think it's a form of confidence, I think, to be able to play quietly and to play without trying to show off. And I think being able to do that and really mess with the dynamics in this one is part of why it seems to work so well with a crowd compared to other things in my set list. And so that's definitely something to look for when you play that, is to try and, you know, to pay attention to what parts in the song might sound better if they're a little bit quieter. Okay, so that was that main riff. And I do change it a little bit towards the end, but we'll get to that in a second. But go through the verse real quick. Starts out with mostly the same shapes as are in that riff. I feel like the verse section is a little bit, you know, it uses a lot of similar shapes to what I explained in the intro. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but so that's almost exactly the same. So I'm doing a partial bar right here on the second fret. I'm just picking up that sort of, just picking up the G and the E string. I'm just hammering on a minor third, sort of sixth, I guess, over that. At the same time, I am muting with my palm on those strings, so that, and I'm also like really trying to make this ring out, so that way it, you know, when you're doing a fingerstyle arrangement, you are doing a bit of misdirection and sleight of hand, and so it helps to kind of mute stuff when it's not the center of attention, and so that really helps right there to be able to do that. Still the same shapes, but all I've done really different is just change the phrasing with what I'm doing right there on the third fingering. Definitely some vibrato there helps. So that's a pull off, starting from like a fret down. So index finger right there on. That chord. So that is that's not a pull off. That's, and then I do change the fingering a little bit here as well. This is a 4, 2, and a 1. And then I slide down, the pinky stays where it is, but the other parts slide down right there. So I've got the index finger on that C that's on the B string, and then the second finger on the G string, 3rd fret. So I don't play bass line under that. And then that pause right there, that's with the 3rd finger. So this part is it's nothing sneaky there, no hammer-ons, pull-offs, just so when I do get to that point, I do make it a point to play those quarter notes. Love that chord, it's so pretty. It's not the actual chord that was in the arrangement, because I think the one in the arrangement has that in the bass. I feel like this key works better because the hook is so much. I feel like it's important to be able to play it in this key because the hook works so well right there on the E minor and the B diminished. So for the sake of being able to keep the rest of the arrangement playable, I've had to sacrifice that chord, unfortunately, because it's beautiful, but I feel like that one's not too far off, in terms of the chord flavors, so I feel like it's okay enough to include. But I have tried to sweeten it a little bit. So with my index finger, I'm playing on the index finger on the A string, 3rd fret. Got that right there, and then so that chord is an index finger on the 3rd fret A string. So that's with the thumb pick, and then up with the rest of your fingers. And so I've got finger number 2 on the B string on the 3rd fret, and then finger number 3 on the 4th fret G string. And I've just got the E string open, just to pull off of that E minor sort of partial shape. And I'm kind of muting by, I'm not muting with my palm in those instances, I'm muting by like letting go of tension with my fretting hand. So that's something that I picked up from Ranger Doug when he does a lot of the Western swing chords and time jumpers. And it just kind of adds to your palette and gives you a little bit more control over what's ringing out and cleans up your mix a little bit. So I'm doing a pull off from that with the, so that's my 3rd finger on the D string, 4th fret, and then index finger G string, 2nd fret. I'm just sliding up that shape 3 frets. So when I slide down from that chord, index finger goes down 2, and then I pick up kind of essentially a triad sort of interval with the middle finger, and then I slide that back up 1. And that's with my index finger. And then I just hammer this on with my third finger. So on the A string, 6th fret. I don't even remember what I do. Okay, yeah. 3, 2, 1. And then with the 4th finger, I'm playing that 7. So 4th finger, 2nd fret. And then with the index finger back here. So this is all like B string, E string, B, B. And it ends on that chord. The index finger is kind of the vestigial, I suppose. I'm not really using it for anything. So that shape is just the 2nd on the A string, A string, 6th fret, 2nd finger. So I really play a lot with using open strings wherever I can. So with that chord, I'm just right there with my 2nd finger on the 6th fret, and then I just slide it down 3 frets, and then up 1, do that strum. So now index finger right here back on the 8th fret, B string. You notice here when I come back to this sort of shape, I'm actually using the pinky finger to pick that up. That's because I'm using a different chord shape right here. So that chord shape is just at the 9th fret, 2, 1, 3. I'm just sliding it down. So it's a little bit cattywampus, trying to get that right. So I've picked up the bottom chord. So I start, it's not a hammer-on, but I just start with that open sort of shape. So I'm still holding that top chord. And then I pick up the top chord and move it just down 1 fret. That's open A string. It's all 3 open strings again. Slide that down. Back down to the 2nd fret, just like in the intro. It is a little bit difficult. You are getting your fingers tangled here. Same as the normal riff. So then with the index finger, I just slide that up. So it goes from the 2nd fret to the 3rd fret. That's important for this next shape that's borrowing time in the wee small hours of the morning to try and finish this and not have any disturbances. And so far we've done I've done pretty well. So I might just stay on this kind of schedule and just knock out a bunch of stuff. It's easier doing a whole bunch of stuff at once of the same type of thing than it is like wearing a lot of different hats. So it's like usually if I'm working with people, I'm just like, give me all the things like right now, and I'll just figure it out on the way down. That tends to work better for me than just do a little bit of this, and then do this little thing over here, and then run over here and do this. Oh, we are caffeinated. We've had yogurt. We have a dog over here. The other thing too is I find that long periods of uninterrupted work are going to be that's going to be one of your best friends in terms of practicing really heavy material and really understanding it. So it's okay to be by yourself. It weirds people out sometimes, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It's funny, like so many of my friends who are amazing fingerstyle players are really into tennis. I didn't see that growing up here. It wasn't as common here, but I think there's something about the nature of that sport compared to piano or compared to guitar that the way that you think about it, I think, is similar. It's very reactive. It's very much an individual sport, so it's easy to really dial in your performance. Whereas if you're on a football team, or if you're on a baseball team or a soccer team, what you do matters, but you can try your best, and it still is left up to the decision of a judge or decision of everyone else on the team or everyone else on the other team, and there's just so many variables with that. Whereas I think a lot of the individual sports or the individual pursuits, you can really get a good grasp of what your behavior is like and how you think, and it's very self-paced, and so I think it is more self-directed, it is more niche in how you learn, but I think it's also more specialized and more intricate, and it just kind of makes you ask very different questions. Okay, so in the verse I talked about that there was a chord substitution that I kind of left out, that I leave out of my arrangement because it's just a little bit impractical for me. But that chord shape, if you do want to play it that way, that's how I typically do it. So that's your index finger, 6th string, 1st fret. Middle finger, 5th string, 2nd fret. 4th string is completely open. Pinky is on the 4th fret of the G string. And then your 3rd finger, your ring finger, is on the B string, 3rd fret. And then picking up right back where we left off, from that chord, you just slide your middle finger up 1 fret where it already is. It stays on that string. And it stays there, so what I'm doing is picking up those two on the B and D strings with respectively my pinky and my 3rd finger. So that leaves my index finger free to go down here to the top E string. So the only thing I'm hitting with the thumb pick in that is that note, but everything else I'm doing with the PMAC notation on your fingers. I'm catching that sort of, that's with the index in the middle, and then the high E string, I'm catching that with my ring finger. that is index finger still on that note. And then I lift up the pinky so that I can grab that. Okay, so kind of up to that breakdown section, I'll work on that right now, but so yeah, that's that chord right there. So just open at that point, and then I call this, if you know Randy Newman, of course you've heard Toy Story, and then theme song from that being You've Got a Friend in Me. I call that riff the We're Not Friends riff because it's basically the minor version of that phrase, You've Got a Friend in Me. And that's just, it's not exact, but it just kind of functions as a good transition for my hand to get back to so the second time around, first time around I go, and then second time around with that I go, and it takes some pretty good finger strength to be able to do that with your index finger, but I'm actually barring, I am barring 3 strings right there. So I'm actually barring 3 strings right there. So just using my index finger to do a partial bar on the E, B, and G, the 2nd fret, and then 3rd fret. Let go of that. It's not a pull off, just letting go. Not a hammer on. So all of that is picked. So that's picked. That slides down 1 fret. So in hitting that note on the B string, I lift up all my other fingers so that it rings, but then it gives me space to go up here. So I need to do the We're Not Friends riff for you. So just hitting that low note, and then that's all with my 1 finger, all on that E string. And then I grab that minor 3rd sort of interval on using the index finger right there on that 1st string. That's going from the 6th fret to the 7th fret. I'm just moving up 1. And to quote kind of lyrically what Randy's doing with the phrasing and You've Got a Friend Like Me, it just kind of mocks that, but it keeps that sort of accentuation with those 2 are separate, so it's not flowy, it's so I slide back down to that chord, which is just the 3 and the 1. So just index finger on the 3rd fret E string, and then 3rd finger on the B string at the 5th fret. And then I just fretted, open, and then I just move that same shape that I had. I just move that down 2 strings. So it does sound a little bit wonky, it's supposed to. And then this is just like a 4th interval. So you've got 3rd finger on the G string, and then with the 2nd finger I just pick up, a 4th down from that on the same fret. So I'm letting that one go early with my 3rd finger, just doing a pull off on that, but I'm leaving the middle finger there where it was. So that stays fretted. The ring finger comes off. It's really quick. And then really quickly I go to that E minor sort of 4th, and then pull that off. My bad, I don't pull that off, I actually fret that. And then I go back to my original shape. So I go back to my original shape, but this time around, I'm doing something a little bit different with the index finger. So instead of just picking up that 1st string, I'm barring a partial bar with that index finger on 3 strings. You don't hear the B string ring out because that's already fretted, so it is redundant, but I do that because those 2 ring out. So you've got the G string and the E string ringing out against each other. So most of it's fretted, but there is a section in there where I'm sliding down and then pulling off. So all that's picked. So going from the 3rd fret, sliding down to the 2nd, and then pulling off onto the 0. So I'm picking that up with just the index finger. So it's not barred anymore. It's just an individual. And I take my pinky off just in time for me to hit that. So I'm fretting it, and then I'm fretting it again and pulling off from there, letting it ring really hard so it kind of masks any potential fret noise I might have in changing that fingering. So I pick up that with the index finger, and I take everything else off. You see it, it's just kind of floating, freestanding with that index finger. That allows me to kind of function as a safeguard so that those really ring out, and so there's no chance of my fingers getting in the way of that. That shape, now that we're up here. So that's just the B string completely open against that. Pull off that index finger, go to the 8th fret, and then I pick that up under it on the B string with my 3rd finger. Hammer off. So the first one is just the B string. The first time around the B string is open, the second time around I'm fretting on the B string, and I pull off both of those, and when I come back to that is like I'm fretting on the 8th fret with the B string with my middle finger. So the index finger is still in the same spot right here. And then now with the 2nd finger and the 3rd finger, I'm letting that E string, I'm picking up that E string as well with the, that's just open. And the B string, that is, what fret is that? 9, 10. So that's on the 10th fret. And so now I've got my thumb kind of picking the melody part, and it just kind of, I'm just playing with the dynamics a little bit with that. It's nothing, it's just there, you know, I'm not really thinking about like, oh, this needs to be syncopated. I'm just thinking about that passing chord situation needs to sound really nice and needs to ring out. So that's kind of, I'm not trying to do a boom chick sort of thing right there, is I guess what I'm saying with the picking pattern. So again, I'll go through that pretty slowly, and then back at the 10th fret. And I'm just hammering off, or I'm just pulling off that note right there on the B string with my third finger. And then I keep my ring finger on the string as a guide so that I don't get lost when I make that journey down to the bottom of the fretboard again. But so 10th fret, 8th fret, same sort of thing. So that one, no hammer-ons or pull-offs with that. The next one after it right there, I pull off that ring finger again. And that's my index finger on the A string, 3rd fret. Back to that chord shape again. And I really, at this point, I really want to let that ring. That's basically the same thing as I already showed you, and then so vibrato is really important with all of this. And then this shape, so at this shape, people always ask me about what I'm doing with my hands there. I really don't know that it's all that difficult. I think it's just not used a whole lot, but I'll go through it. The chord shape I'm using for this is, it's basically what I showed you before with I'd say about the only difference is I am changing the fingerings. So I'm kind of, you know, with the bass line, I'm kind of leading with that middle finger. So that's with the middle finger on that 8th fret. 8, 7, 8. So going from the 6th string down to the 1st string, it's fretted 8th fret with the middle finger, index finger on the 7th fret, ring finger on the 8th fret again, open, pinky on the 8th. But what I'm doing with the strum in hand, so I'm not exactly like way back here, because then you lose a little bit of your dynamics, because I'm doing that with the index finger. So I'm dragging my index finger up, and again, this is really where it matters that you don't really use nails on this kind of stuff if you want it to be like exact. I mean, you can use nails. I'm still going to be excited that you're playing these arrangements, but you know, I think I'm like stopping right here on the A string. So I'm dragging up all the way to that A string and just kind of letting it trail off right there. But I am hitting all those. So when I get to about here is when I let that one strike. My hand's really loose when I'm doing this. This isn't like a really aggressive thing to do. It's just kind of like. So in that, I use kind of a lute player style hand thing. I don't know why, it just feels comfortable to me. I do anchor my pinky like Tommy Emmanuel, like a lot of players that I really dig. It's just gives you a lot more control and a lot more, I think, control over specifically the dynamics of your attack. And also, it allows you to kind of know what string you're on a little bit more easily. And it's less work on your hands. So in terms of technique, I don't know that that's really taught in proper guitar schools, if there is such a thing, but it works. I've not seen any deformities in my hand from it, so it must not be too bad. I've been doing this for, I'd say 13 years of playing like this, and my hands aren't too crooked right now, so I don't think it'll hurt you if you pick it up. And I think you'd be surprised how many guitarists do use it, and I think it's very effective. And as opposed to like bluegrass strumming, you're kind of like right here. I think Molly Tuttle's technique, for instance, is absolutely astonishingly perfect, and it's so efficient. But for this kind of stuff, I struggle with that. You know, no one has a full deck of cards in terms of what they do as a musician, and for me, this feels more comfortable, and especially when you are potentially playing harmonics in what you do, especially harp harmonics, you want to be able to have that pinky anchor so that when you get up here, you can pivot off of that and have extreme control. So it's just already in the right place if I do decide to go that way, and I've just kind of trained myself into that. So, but it does help when it comes to this kind of stuff. So that, I think, is what allows me to have that really, really loose sort of movement with that strum. So I'm picking that up with my ring finger. And then I just move those three down. And that movement is just, I'm back down at the 2nd fret with my ring finger. So that first part of it is so just hitting that, letting it sustain and letting that ring out, and then so the first shape in that is just ring finger and then 0 fret under that, so that's on the D string and the G string. And then the index finger picks up that note on the G string on the 2nd fret. So I've slid up my 4th finger and picked up that other fretted note with my index finger. And then this one I keep the ring finger where it was and just slide it up 1 fret, and then do that major sort of interval above it with the middle finger, G string, 4th fret. And I really try and sustain that. You know, it doesn't always happen, but it certainly helps. Or to, I try to give that some vibrato. I think it helps. It's not necessarily mandatory, but it definitely is icing on the cake. And I'm dragging these out, you know. You hear that it's not like, I'm not like fretting it and then letting up. I am leaving it legato. And then sliding back down to that chord. So that is index finger on the B string, or index finger on the A string. A string, 2nd fret, and then we've got middle finger on the G string, 2nd fret, and pinky on the B string, 4th fret. So I'm really taking advantage of pull-offs with this. So it's actually not that hard to fret. So I'm just picking those up with my fingers. I'm not hitting those with a thumb pick. So those are just upstrokes with my fingers. And then this line, done with my thumb pick. All those are picked up with my fingers on my strumming hand. And then on my fretting hand, I'm pulling off that note on the B string. So those chords are kind of moving together, but it's not the same shape throughout. It does change a little bit just to kind of accommodate this scale. This line, starting at the 2nd fret, just those 2 fretted notes. The only open string I'm doing for this is the pull off with the pinky and the high E string. There's no open notes sort of in the bottom register. Doesn't sound like it works. And then you add that on top. So this movement is from the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th frets. The high string that you're picking up with your pinky is with 4th fret, 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret. So it's not exactly even. So the first one's going to be a little bit more spread out. It skips a fret. So that has a fret in between those 2 groupings. And you notice I'm syncopating that, so as these notes are ringing out, I'm bringing that up. Okay, so I'm picking up that while I've still got it fretted. And then when I go to that note, I pick up this hand and can go to the next position, which is just kind of like a minor, E minor. It's based around that sort of, just that standard E minor sort of rock chord, that sort of thing. It's just the higher voicing of it. So if you were to continue that with the cage system, do like that A minor shape and take that all the way up there. So I'm just using those top 3. And this is where it's going to matter what your capo position is, like what I talked about with the horn and the instrument. So what I'm doing right there is that's at the 7th fret, down to the 6th, and back up to the 7th. And then I'm hitting an open E on the bottom and hammering on the 7th fret with my thumb over the neck. And it's really hard to try and keep the intonation right, so be mindful of that. And also, if you're struggling with that, don't worry about it too much. Max. He's dreaming. Oh, it's Joel. He's awake. He lives here. Shh. He lives here. So, anyways, what I was going to show you is the Tommy's hands are like this too, by the way, but kind of makes you feel like a fiddler crab, because after a while, like if I match up those joints right there, you see like that, they're matched up at the joints. I'm not doing anything to try and trick you, but you see like this thumb is longer by, I'd say, yeah, there you can see the thumb's probably like not quite a 1/4 of an inch longer, but your bones kind of like recycle about every 10 years, and I don't know all the science behind it, but your body does kind of form to what you need it to do to a certain extent. And specifically with guitar, I've seen my hands do that, and this thumb is a bit more flexible. It can do a bit more dexterous kind of stuff. I'm pretty double jointed as well anyways, but this thumb, on the other hand, is used to that thumb picking sort of thing, and it's straight. It's used to like tensing up like that, and I've probably really worked those muscles right here pretty hard in comparison to this one, where I'm using this more as a pivot sort of situation. So I've probably done like tons of finger yoga on this one and tons of like leg day on this thumb. So comparatively, that's probably part of why they're so different. But you know, if you keep at it, your hands, and you know, don't go until your hands are in severe pain. Don't do that. If that's the case, there might be something wrong with your setup. Maybe you need a smaller guitar. Maybe you need lighter strings. Maybe you need to tune down. Maybe your action's too high. There's all kind of variables that that you could look at before blaming yourself and saying you can't play, you know. 24 hours later. Okay, so picking up where I left off yesterday. I don't know if you would call this the chorus or the breakdown or whatever. I don't really know. But anyways, so I'm just doing this minor triad right here. So this is E, B, and the G string with your index finger on that 7th fret. And then, so it changes from that minor triad to just like a 6th with that over the bass, and then in that move, so that shape right there is just the index finger on the 7th fret, open B string, and then the G string, I've got my 2nd finger on the 8th fret. And then I actually switch fingerings from the 2nd to the 3rd on that G string. So it's still the same note, but I switch fingerings so that I just switch fingerings and pick it up, and I take that index finger down and pick up and do the switched fingering. And it's really important right there. You know, this is hard for me to keep it in tune right here because my hands aren't really long enough to reach that chord really well, so I have to struggle with that one. And then I just slide down that ring finger when I'm going from this. I leave it right there. I just take the ring finger and slide that down from the 8th to the 5th fret. So it's kind of legato slide. And it puts me in that spot to do that. Same fingering as before when I introduced that. Picking up where we left off yesterday, we've got that minor triad that I'm just index finger right here, 2nd, 3rd fingers, starting on the E string. And then I go to like a 6th on the high end. So I've got my 2nd finger on the G string, and my 1st finger on that high E, 7th fret. The B string is open, and then the G string, I've got that there. But then I change the fingering a little bit here. So I actually take where the 2nd finger is on that G string, I replace it with the 3rd finger, same fret, right at the 8th fret still, and that allows me to do that with my index finger and go down with it. So I am picking up that chord for that change, so it is a little bit staccato right there. So you hear I pick it up, and then I drag this finger from the 8th fret down to the 5th fret. It's just like a legato sort of slide. Back to the same way we did it before with the same fingerings. So pull off, pull off, pull off, slide, pull off to the open string. So you do that a 2nd time. So starting at the chorus again. And then, so I'm just sliding that minor triad up another fret from the 6th to the 7th, and then just picking that with my M finger in PMAC terms. So on the 10th fret now, pinky right here, pinky on the B string 10th fret, and then third finger on the D string 10th fret. Slide it down into that. And I have the E string open ringing above that too, and I really want to make that ring right there because it just adds a lot of intensity to it. And it activates the sympathetic overtones on the guitar, so all the other notes on the guitar that are strung up, those ring in sympathy with it if they're within the same sort of scale family. So if it's like the 1 or the 5 of the chord, and it's also like, you know, to personify it, if it hears the other notes that are in key with it, they'll ring out with it. Kind of like, you know, if you're talking at a certain pitch, like I find that if I'm talking at a pitch and it turns out to be like, if I were to auto-tune it, it would be at like G. My guitar will buzz on the wall if I'm talking about at that register, because they're so reactive to sympathetic overtones. So you're really kind of cheating the system if you know how to use that, and it's one of my favorite tricks. But so anyways, back to that shape. So sliding down from the 10th fret into that sort of minor 6. So the base of that is just that E minor sort of shape at the 7th fret. So you've got third finger here, second finger here, and then picking that finger up on the just that 4th shape with the pinky, and then so that's on the E and the B string, from the 6th to the 7th fret. So that's on the B and the D string. So that's the first time you do that chord. And this is kind of like a walk down I did earlier, where it's just kind of, I'm pulling off that ring finger right here on the B string. So my second finger's on the D, 8th fret, and then my ring finger is on the B string 8th fret. So I'm picking up the chord after I'm done with it, but I'm also specifically doing a pull up or a pull off. And then I just let all that ring and then grab that C shape, that C note right there. Nothing new. And then this as well. So still using those same kind of parallel shapes with the hammer on, same technique, but then I end on this chord, which is index finger on the A string, 6th fret. So index finger on the A string, 6th fret, middle finger on the D string, 7th fret, pinky on the 8th fret, G string, and then pinky on the 8th fret, G string, ring finger on that B string at the 7th fret, and then the E string open. And then kind of a reprise here. If you want to play the full chord, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but this sort of strumming technique just sweetens things up. It's something I got from Tommy Emmanuel, particularly in songs like Ava Waits. And it's been notated wrong in the past when I've seen him use this technique, but in the tabs that I've done for him, specifically, that's something that I remember I've corrected and added to the newer editions. But usually what he's doing in those sort of downstrokes is, it's usually like, with a pick or without, it's kind of like the first 3 are downstrokes, and then you kind of use this finger, so you use your ring finger on your picking hand, and you just, so 3 down with your thumb, and then, you know, and it depends. In this case, I don't play that top 6 string when I strum all the way down, but I just kind of probably stop at the D string or the A string. So I just kind of do something along those lines when I play that. And really play with the vibrato. And then this is the same chord shape as before, except I'm using the index finger and barring everything but the top 6th string. So you get that extra harmony on top. Same quote as the intro. The only difference right here is, you see I'm doing the ring finger lines up with what the pinky's doing, and before it was disconnected, so the pinky was on its own and playing that. But the way I play it the very last time around, and it works. You know, I don't know if I was really consciously trying to do that, but I'll keep it. I like it. And then I changed the riff a little bit as the outro riff. So and this is keeping with the original arrangement that Randy did. And this is so this is keeping with the original way that Randy does the outro. So I'll go through that really quickly for you, and then I'll explain the shapes and also just the fade out and what I'm doing to try and create that artificial fade out, because I'm not changing my volume when I do that. I'm just changing my pick attack. So same as before, because in the intro I do. So that's the first iteration of the riff. The second time around I'm doing. Okay, so that's the same shape as the original. I do try and draw out that separation between those two notes just because I think it's a little bit sweeter. And I'm using all the vibrato that I can, as per usual with this song. So just and then take the index finger down to the A, first fret. And then I change my fingering here, so. So that's how I change it. I go up from the 6th to the 7th fret. That's with the middle finger and then the ring. So I'm just fretting it normally. There's no hammer-ons or pull-offs there. I can't remember why I picked those fingers for it. I think it just gives me more range of motion to get back to that. I think that's really about the only reason I picked those. But I mean, if you're comfortable doing whatever fingerings work for you, you know, just know why you're doing it. That just gives you a better foundation, I think, when you're when you're trying to figure out your own arrangements or trying to figure out other people's arrangements. The fingerings, depending on whose work you're doing, different people have different ways about handling that. And particularly with fingerstyle, when you're dealing with so many different competing voicings at the same time, and you're using such misdirection to kind of make the piece sound bigger than it is by guiding the listener through the mix and changing the dynamics of this at one point so that you can, sneakily get to another section over here. Like, when you get into that kind of stuff, it really does matter what your fingerings are. And so it does sound tedious, and I know I sound exhaustive explaining all this kind of stuff. If these fingerings don't work for you, they are just a suggestion because they work for me. Take from it what you can. Throw out what's not useful to you, at least at this point in time, maybe it's not useful. And still just, do what your hands are comfortable with. I'm going back and relearning a lot of the Jerry Reed stuff as it was transcribed. So a lot of those were done by John Knowles years ago, and they're pretty darn accurate. And I'm getting so much value out of studying just the fingerings in those. So I'm putting myself through the ringer just as much as I'm asking from anyone else, because it's, I think, one of the best things you can do in terms of kind of making your arrangements stand out and giving yourself freedom to not necessarily have to think about everything. If you have that really drilled into your hands as far as like you do these fingerings at this point, it takes away some of the mental gymnastics you might have to go through in terms of keeping the piece together as you're performing it live, and then, asking yourself the question like, okay, well, musically, what do I do here? Like, what does this, why does this sound like this harmonically? And, like, it gives your ear a little bit of a break while you're performing live, and so you have more legs to stand on in terms of stability, so that you don't mess up when you're performing live, to know, I play this fingering here at this point in time because that's how it feels on the guitar. To be able to have that to further reinforce what your ear is monitoring, I think is a really great sort of safeguard. So it just kind of hedges your bet so that you're more likely to have a more solid performance. So anyways, back to the fade out. So when I start out, it's pretty accented, and I let it ring. You hear it's already. So not only am I muting with my palm, I'm also getting much, much quieter with this. I'm trying to make sure that my fingers don't cause any more squeaks than are absolutely just, part and parcel to it. So I'm handling all those things at the same time. I'm trying to taper off both the string noise. I'm retaining a little bit of vibrato still. I feel like it gives the illusion that the guitar player is still involved in it. If you were thinking of it in terms of a multi-tracked mix, I think it gives the illusion that it's manually done in post-production rather than done by the guitar player to continue fretting in the same way. It still has the same sort of expression to it, but in terms of controlling the volume, I'm still using the same picking pattern. I'm just getting quieter, and I'm muting gradually more and more with a bit more pressure each time. And then the other aspect of it is to have follow-through, stay in character until long after it's not audible anymore. That's half of the trick. Kind of reminds me of Jamie Foxx doing impersonations on Jimmy Fallon. He doesn't quit when the little buzzer stops. He doesn't quit when his bit of the skit is over. He keeps on with it. And the fact that he keeps on with it creates more of a convincing argument that he's that character. So just borrowing from that little bit of stagecraft, don't leave until the project is completely over with, and then some. So I think that drives it home a little bit better and is a bit more convincing on stage. If you stayed through all this, God bless you, because I know it was a lot. I just wanted to cover everything, and I wanted to give the best kind of understanding of how to play this as possible, because I think it's better to learn a piece completely right from the beginning I find it really hard. The songs that I learned as a younger guitar player or as a younger piano player, if I want to learn the updated version of it, it would actually be easier for me just to learn a similar piece but not the same piece. I think it's harder to relearn a piece after your understanding has deepened than it is to just start a new piece that's at that higher advanced skill level. So, in art class, I remember one time my elementary school art teacher, Miss Wade, had us do a project where I was into graphic design and stuff before I was really a guitar player, but she had us do a project way back in the day that was, she gave us, when we walked into the classroom, she had a sheet of paper on everyone's desk, turned down so that you couldn't see what was on the paper, and you were not allowed to touch it. And when she said go, she gave everybody about 20 minutes and said, you're only supposed to flip it over at this orientation, do not change it. And it was a picture that was upside down. You were not allowed to look at it right side up, and we were given the task of trying to draw it for 20 minutes. And what we saw with that is that all these kids who were drawing like stick figures and, little cartoony sort of things that kids usually draw, that, it's just like, oh, it's a circle, so it's a head, or, the hieroglyphic type things where you can look and see. It's not like photorealistic by any means, but you can tell because it's got a face that it's a person. That kind of drawing style. The kids went from that to drawing closer to where the outlines actually were on that photo that we were copying. And it's coming from that perspective of drawing what you see rather than what you know. And when you open yourself up to not come in, to be teachable and to be willing to say, I have no reference points for this. I'm not going to try and pretend to know what I'm doing here. I'm just going to take it as is. The outcome, I think, allows you to be a bit more meticulous and more detailed and get it closer to the original rather than approaching it with an idea of how it's always done. So I guess that's why I'm pretty meticulous about this kind of stuff. But I have personally seen that if I'm given hard stuff to take care of, like if I'm given hard stuff to learn, I feel like I get farther than if I spoon feed myself by trying to go for lessons that are a bit more approachable. It's like, no, I go for stuff that's interesting, that interests me, that I will be willing to spend hours and hours and hours and years and decades focusing on. Because, if it's time tested, and if it's something that's really, especially if it's something older than you, that's still around and is still posthumously outperforming a lot of artists today, there's something to look into about that kind of stuff. And, it's worth aiming high. I really think it's worth aiming high. And I've seen so many young kids who've become very accomplished at this because they have not had someone in their life tell them that it's above their skill level. They don't know any better. They just sit down and do it, and they figure it out on the way down. And, I guess, I like challenging people and just say, it doesn't matter. Just sit to learn it for the intrinsic value of learning it. Don't worry about what other people are going to think about it, if they're going to think that you're legitimate or not. Just sit down and learn it regardless of the skill level. If it interests you, that's enough reason, So that's my argument for why I don't spoon feed. But I do hope that this was clear. I hope that it helps for those of you trying to learn the song, and I hope I'm sending money towards Randy's people through Content ID. If it's possible for me to transcribe this and sell it, I would love to, and I'll let you know if that happens. But as it stands, I have emailed who I think is Randy's manager still, and have not heard back. I may be in her junk folder. I may just need to try through Facebook or something like that. But if you're with Randy's team, let me know. I'd love to do a tab of this. If you are learning my stuff, or if you have questions about learning my stuff, or have requests for other songs you would like me to transcribe or to do a video tutorial on, I'd be happy to do it. And if you want to actively support what I'm doing, I'm not in the category of YouTuber to make ad money off of this kind of stuff. You have to be posting a lot. My channel hasn't grown to that point yet. So if you do want to support what I do have a Patreon page. It's just kind of pay what you want whenever you want kind of thing. So there's no requirements. There's no sort of hoops and packages you have to get. It's not throttled. I mean, whatever you can pay and are inclined to pay is much appreciated. I don't spend it on stupid stuff if that makes you feel better. But yeah, and I'll just put that towards like more time that I can spend towards putting these videos out. If you stayed this long, I really, really appreciate your attention. I know you're busy. So thank you. And I hope this lesson helps. Please share it with people you think might be interested in it as well. First person sharing helps more than anything. Have a great week.